Greetings from Indianapolis, going from Wall Street to feeding the dogs. Our guest today grew up in Queens, New York, and made his way to Greencastle, Indiana, and DePauw University to begin his college career. Dennis Boyd is a 1979 ATO initiate, and after 2 years at DePauw, he moved back east to finish his college degree, eventually finding his way to Wall Street, where he was just a handful of people in the world who sold government bonds on Wall Street. Dennis credits his business acumen and his success in large part to what he experienced those 2 years at DePauw University inside the ATO chapter. After his stint on Wall Street, Dennis moved into private credit, and then he decided he wanted to do something a little different. He started a dog food company, and not just any dog food company, a dog food company that sells raw meat. It was the beginning of a trend. We're interviewing Dennis today in his company's warehouse, and so the noise you hear from time to time in the background is simply his company being successful. I'm Win Smiley, and this is the ATO Show.
Back in the day, which was 1978, I showed up at DePauw and rented a room from a Greencastle resident, an elderly woman who rented me her room, and I went through orientation at DePauw University during the day and Fraternity Rush at night. And at the end of the first week, I pledged ATO before I had attended my first college class. So Fraternity Rush at DePauw is very different than most places.
Right, and what was it about ATO that attracted you to make the decision to join?
There were a couple of things that stood out to me. First of all, and most importantly, overwhelmingly, it was the guys I met who were, members of the fraternity. And I would also say, slightly secondarily, the guys that I was going through Rush with, who all felt good about ATO as a chapter that they were going to strongly consider joining. They just seemed to be the kind of guys that I wanted to be around. So It was the chapter mates and also the guys that, were going back for their second and third visits. I kept seeing some of the same guys, and they just, they were like my kind of guys.
Right, yeah. So and we'll come back to this in a few minutes, Dennis, but I'm interested in, so you were at DePauw for 2 years, and then you transferred to Connecticut and eventually made it to Wall Street, where you were a government bond trader and not just a little one, right? I mean, you were in big time finance on Wall Street and then decided to change careers and start a dog food company. So help me understand your process going from Wall Street to the owner of and creator of a dog food company.
Well, there was a significant step in between. My career on Wall Street started as a government bond trader, and I did that, I guess for the first, I'm going to say 5 years of my career, I was what they called a market maker. And there were about 15 guys in the world who did what I did. I traded a very finite number of government bonds. It was, part of the what they call the yield curve. And there were probably, 65, 75 government bonds out there. And I was responsible for making a market in 15 of them. And there were only about 15 guys in the world who did what I did. So we traded, hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars of bonds on a daily basis because we were the only game in town. There were 15 of us doing it. We were friendly competitors, but that's what we did for 5-6 years. I then made a transition into portfolio management where I ran U.S. Trust Fixed Income Group in New York for a couple of years. And at some point I was getting the itch to do something on my own. I had this entrepreneurial drive that went back to even in college. When I pledged ATO, I was astounded. I come from a big family, and there were 7 kids. I grew up in Queens, New York. When I got to ATO, and I saw a bunch of 18 to 22-year-old guys running a house that had 65 guys living in it, and they did everything from hiring the cook and the house mom and collecting rents from guys and ordering food and cleaning the house and painting the house and taking responsibility for all the things that go into running a fraternity house. I have to tell you, I was blown away. And I thought to myself, geez, you can do anything if you put your mind to it. And the leadership that I witnessed firsthand at ATO was beyond anything I ever dreamed of. And coming from, New York, fraternities are not as popular in the East Coast, especially in the Northeast, as they are in most of the rest of the country. So the fraternity experience was something that nobody in my family had really experienced. I was the first person in my family really to go far away from home to college, and so nobody really had any guidance for me. But I do remember a couple of phone calls going home saying, geez, these guys run this whole household. And my parents, I think, who kind of ruled the house with an iron fist because they had to, were sort of saying, you got to be kidding me. There's no adult supervision in that house. And I said, no, there's not. And it's running pretty well. So that sort of leadership thing, rightly or wrongly, led me to think that I can pretty much do anything.
I'd say rightly based on your career.
Well, possibly. But anyway, the transition piece that I mentioned, it was a little bit of a hole in your biography there of going from Wall Street to dog food company, is that after a couple of years at a corporate structure of U.S. Trust, I really wanted to go out on my own. And so I spoke to a few people that I knew who had significant net worth, and I set up what they call a multifamily office, where I basically was going to be the investment advisor and financial advisor to 6 or 7, very wealthy families, families that had, 20, 30, 50, $100 million in assets. When I did that, it was 2007, right at the start of the financial crisis, and it was an interesting time, to say the least.
Right.
One of the things that happened in the financial crisis is that the commercial bankers around the world started to hold back credit and stopped lending money, especially when it came to real estate and commercial real estate in particular. So I saw an opportunity to develop what we call a private credit fund, where my clients, my investors, put money into an investment fund, a hedge fund, some people would call it, or a loan fund. And they put money in there, and I went out and lent that money to commercial real estate investors, developers, builders who could not get money from the commercial banking system. So I still have that business going. I've been attempting to wind it down for a variety of reasons. I think the risk-reward profile has shifted dramatically from 2008 and 2009 when I built that business. But that was sort of phase 2 of my career. About 15 years ago, I met a great guy who is my dog food partner by the name of Richard, and Richard and I played a lot of squash together. And along the way, he introduced me to the idea of feeding our dogs raw dog food. He had an interesting experience with his own dogs and had a lot of success in creating a healthy and happy dog. So I started doing the same, and the next thing you know, the guy we were buying raw dog food from told us that he was looking for a distributor in the New England market, and so we kind of fell into the business. But again, I look back on my experience at ATO, and I don't think I ever had the guts or the chutzpah to do something so silly as to go into the raw dog food business, never having been in retail, never been in the pet industry. I look back at some of those things, and I think to myself, the leadership skills that I saw and achieved myself at ATO in 2 years gave me the confidence that we can do this. So
you were really the dog food company. You were, it sounds like, on the tip of the spear of healthy dog food, the healthy dog food movement.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think in the last 2 years, people have become well aware of Farmer's Dog, which advertised on the Super Bowl a couple of years in a row, and they seem to be bombarding the airwaves and media waves with advertising dollars. They've got an enormous private equity infusion of capital that allows them to do that. But they are raising the tides for all boats, so to speak, because they are educating consumers and dog owners or pet owners that feeding their dogs some healthy food and alternatives to kibble is a good thing. So we're happy to see them succeeding.
Right, good for your business as well. What, Dennis? What was the culture like on Wall Street, and what prompted you to say, you know what, I want to try something else? Was it you got bored with it, or the culture was not something that you wanted to continue with? I'm just curious. Why does someone move from what a lot of people would say you're in a position that you've got it made?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. First of all, when I said I was a market maker for 5 years, it was an incredibly stressful position. The firm, there's different types of traders on Wall Street, and my role as a trader was the firm that I worked for. I worked for two main firms, and the firms that I worked for handed me sort of an unlimited amount of capital to put at risk buying and selling bonds based on what I thought was the right time or the right decision. Very stressful. It's not something you can do for a long time. And after doing it for 5 years as a market maker, I then did it, for like 6 years on top of that, in a slightly different role. But nonetheless, it's a very stressful thing. It's a young person's game. I think the older you get on Wall Street, if you're a trader doing what I was doing, the more you realize how much risk you're taking. And I think as a 22, 24, 26-year-old, you don't necessarily understand that, and that's a good thing. So, so after 10 or 11 years of that, the stress is a lot. So there's a natural progression, I think, for some people like myself to go from being a market maker, a trader, into a portfolio management position, which is a little bit less stressful. So that was a natural progression. After that, the decision to set up this multifamily office, that wasn't much of a stretch either, because there are a lot of guys who end up, in some capacity on Wall Street and then go out and become financial advisors and try to, manage money themselves. So for me, that part was pretty much a natural transition.
Yeah. How did your life change when you look back? How did your life change from making that move? Just personal life, family life. What did you see happen?
Well, first of all, for the 10 or 11 years that I was in that high stress trading job, I was not married, and I wanted to get married. I wanted to have a family. Growing up in a big family, I always thought that was the most important thing in my life. And so I was ready for that. So, simultaneous to me, leaving the high stress position of trading, I did get married and start a family. I've got 3 daughters that are 26 to 31 years of age. And that's been, the most rewarding part of my life for sure. So the transition, the timing of it was all good. As I said, work, family, work-life balance. I didn't have a lot of work-life balance for those first 10 or 11 years. It was a high-stress thing. I was up early, was out late. It was just a, crazy thing. And frankly, I just wasn't that healthy physically, probably emotionally or mentally. It's, just one of those things that you can't do for too long. And as I said, it's kind of a young guy's game.
Right, absolutely. So if you had to do it all over again, Dennis, would you start with your own business, or do you think that the progression really helped you be successful when you got to that point?
No, I don't regret it. I don't spend a lot of time regretting much of anything in life. You can learn from some lessons, and maybe you'd say, well, I might tweak this or do it slightly differently. But no, there's no point in regretting. So I do think that when you get out of school, there are some people that are ready to be entrepreneurs and have that leadership skill that they can do it right away. For me, I don't think that was right. In fact, I would almost go so far as to say if I had to do it over again, I might have stayed a little bit longer on Wall Street, if for no other reason than the financial rewards, for those who stick around longer, ended up just being bigger. And while that's certainly not the only measure, money is not the only measure of success, obviously. I look at, family is probably the most important thing, and, your faith is probably right up there with it. But certainly, certainly moving out to, getting out of New York City and moving to suburbs, raising a family, that was an important part of what I wanted to do with my life.
Right. So you've no doubt seen and worked with a good number of very successful business people, entrepreneurs in particular. What do you look for if you're talking with somebody, or even, our ATO undergraduates who are just looking at what they might professionally be doing, when I'm sure a number of them are looking in the financial markets and business and that kind of thing. What do you look for when you see somebody in terms of determining if you think that they have what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur?
Well, listen, you got to have a lot of self-confidence. You got to have a thick skin. You have to, I believe, be willing to take risks, make mistakes, and not let those mistakes bother you, because it's part of growing. It's part of achieving success. As a New York Giants football fan, I watched Eli Manning play quarterback for the Giants, and boy, could he be frustrating. But the one thing I admired out of that guy is he'd throw an interception, come back on the field 2 minutes later, and just keep throwing the ball downfield. You have to, as I said, thick skin's important, but you have to be willing to make mistakes and understand, how to maybe calculate the risks of those decisions. And when you make a mistake, accept it's a mistake, admit it's a mistake, move on, learn from it, and just keep going. So, you ask, what do I look for, or what would I recommend young guys coming out of school in terms of their desire to be an entrepreneur? I would say be patient. I do think working for a larger organization is frequently a good learning ground where you can cut your teeth and maybe learn things that might take you twice as long or 3 times as long to learn if you started out on your own right away. So I think the path that I chose is a good one. I'm maybe talking position here, but some guys are capable of coming out of school, and depending upon the business or the industry, they're capable of being successful right away as an entrepreneur in that business. For me, it was good that I had 11 years of working with other people and working in a large scale corporate environment to learn from.
Yeah, I would certainly think, because I've heard enough people say this, and certainly it's been true in my life too. If you're afraid to fail, then you're too afraid. And even though you don't want to fail, you can certainly learn a lot of things in going through something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's, listen, and as I said, I think ATO laid a great foundation for developing those leadership skills. I don't, for the young men that go off to college and live in a dorm, that's fine for many of them. But I would suggest that, they will grow so much more quickly and sooner by joining a fraternity and participating in all that goes with the commitment, the loyalty, the bonding that goes on between, chapter mates, pledge brothers in particular, I would say. And I think the idea of making decisions and actively participating in your own development is critical. And I think you can go to school and go join a dorm and have a great college experience, but boy, you join a fraternity, it becomes in many ways the most valuable experience you're going to have at college. My father, who was the first graduating class of Iona College and never went away to college, when I left, he gave me some advice that I don't know where he got the wisdom to do it, but he said, son, I was a gym rat. I was a basketball player and I was a gym rat, and he told me, listen, hit the books, study hard, don't live in the gym the way you might like to, he said, but half of what you learn in college is going to come outside of the classroom. And it was wisdom that I don't know how he, discovered that, but it was very true. And I would say, of the 50% of the stuff that I learned at college that was outside the classroom, 99% of it came from being in that fraternity for 2 years.
And that's been consistently true from, I think, probably the dawn of fraternities, and in ATO's case, 1865. So regardless of the generation, the consistent comment is, I learned a whole lot of what I use today because of the fraternity and not in the classroom. So that's been very consistent. It's interesting. I was just at a conference earlier this week where Jean Twenge, who is a researcher and professor at San Diego State University in California, and she's, I would say, probably one of the top researchers regarding today's generation and the impact of social media and the iPhone. And one of the statistics that she cited was the number of kids, elementary school kids, who 25 years ago either walked to school by themselves or rode their bicycle by themselves, a very high percentage compared to today, where almost nobody does. And her point was, because their parents drop them off at school, her point was today's high school seniors going to college in many cases have had so little exposure to just being independent and making mistakes and making decisions on their own that it's really difficult for them to even know how to do that. And I think fraternity today probably is more helpful than it was even in your case, because I'm guessing, coming from a large family, you had a whole lot of opportunity to make decisions and determine how to get along with one another and all of those. And I'm guessing your parents didn't drop you off at school every day as well.
No.
A lot of independence, and that's just not happening as much today.
Yeah, no question. And I frequently say that to friends of mine when we discuss our own children and generational differences like you're referring to. The kids today, teenagers, high school age kids, they're so much more worldly in many respects. They know so much more. The world's become a smaller place. They can read about places so much more easily. They can travel to places in ways that maybe we couldn't, 40 years ago or so. But I would say that you're hitting on a big difference, and that is that the kids today are so less independent. So that independence is interesting, and I do think the fraternity experience does breed a little bit more of independence than a lot of kids are used to when they go away.
Absolutely. So you, I may be putting you on the spot a little bit here, but you were gracious enough to join us in Chicago last January for about 24 hours to observe our President's Retreat and our Elevate Retreat, where we bring in undergraduate officers and up-and-coming leaders. I'm just curious what your observations were being around about 800 ATO undergraduate ATOs for 24 hours.
Well, my first reaction to that is to tell you that I was jealous that I'm not, 20 years old again, getting an opportunity to live that life again. It was a great experience for me. It was a lot of fun. My second reaction is I was so impressed by so many of those young guys that I met. Again, I don't remember being that mature when I was their age, but again, I think the ATO experience was great for me, and I just think that the kids I met, they were 20-year-olds, but with a maturity of 30-year-olds, and it was great to see. I also found some of the exercises we did as a group and individually to be kind of fascinating in terms of reflecting on your own leadership style and being able to understand how your personality influences your leadership style. There are a lot of things that you're not going to do well as a leader, and if you recognize them and you can let somebody else take the reins of those responsibilities, and understanding what you do well, spreading the word is a good thing. So yeah, I enjoyed it. It had been a long time since I had been attended an ATO event like that. So it was a ton of fun. I told a lot of people when I got back home for it. So I look forward to going to it again. I just hope that you pick some other venue than Chicago in January.
Right. Well, yeah, the O'Hare rarely closes, so that's good for us. But yeah, it is definitely cold in Chicago in January. Is your dog food company local only, like people pick it up, or is there an online component as well, like you ship dog food to wherever?
Yeah, we do. The bulk of our customer base is in New England, but we have customers that come. We don't have a retail storefront or a brick and mortar store. We do have a warehouse in Connecticut here, so we have a lot of local people that will come pick up dog food at the warehouse. But the bulk of our business is e-commerce.
Yeah. So if someone wants to check it out, what's the website? Where can they go?
You go to topdogfoodandsupply.com. The word "and" is spelled out A-N-D, topdogfoodandsupply.com. So if you, and we're a raw dog food company, so we have, again, kind of a specialty. It's only about 6% of the dog food business today, but a couple of years ago it was 4%. So it's grown pretty dramatically, about 33%, and we've seen that type of growth as well each year. So we're getting there, but it's, as I said, it's a lot of fun. It's a good semi-retirement job for me that I'm enjoying. So,
Dennis, well, I certainly appreciate your time today and your insights. I know the listeners will certainly enjoy it. Thank you for taking the time to share some of your life story with us.
You're welcome, Wayne. It was good to see you again, and look forward to doing it again.
Take care.